Hello, everyone. I'm David Garia, CEO of HumAInity Works, a new company involved in the provision of human AI collaboration services to professional service firms. Professional service firms have been largely founded on traditional systems and solutions to support their clients. And today we want to aim to revolutionize this industry by providing some element of automation in the knowledge to move professional services from service factories, which they are today, and they are doing it quite well, to move beyond that concept and move into what I call a concept of thinking factories, where they actually systemize knowledge into an engineered process to create higher value to clients. Our end goal is actually not just for professional service firms to become thinking factories, but eventually to evolve progressively into thinking organisms, which basically include also an element of the human dimension where there is the three kinds of elements. They are the intelligence, insight, and emotion. With me today, there is Chris Lawrence, who is one of our board members on this new company. Welcome, Chris, for this. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for joining. Thanks.
Thank you.
Today, I'd like to introduce you and to get to know more a bit about Chris and his reasons to join the board and what are his aspirations and what are his views about the company. Welcome, Chris. Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Right. Well, I've had a long and surprisingly varied career. I started life as a languages student, therefore have always been fascinated by the way other people think. Languages actually forces you to look at the world through other people's eyes, and that's a very rich start. I then moved into international banking, having spent time in South America as a young man, and worked increasingly in cross-border mergers and acquisitions. Fascinating because it was about binding together different cultures, different ways of thinking. 2 and 2 makes 5. Not easy at all. Ultimately, success depended very much on a meeting of minds as much as a common business model. That then carried me through. I'd started life also as a musician, so I spent a time running one of the London's great orchestras, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, which was an extraordinary experience. And then I moved back into the world of finance and joined Price Waterhouse at the time when it was merging with Coopers and Lybrand around the world, which involved over 100 local mergers in the many countries around the world where both firms worked. This was an extraordinary experience. Professional services, you would imagine there's a huge amount of commonality, but cultural, regional, language differences all came into play. And I think what was really fascinating over the 3 or 4 years that it took to bed in the merger was how there was a meeting of minds, how they created a common approach, a common culture, and a common language, and how the richness and diversity of all the different ways of thinking actually came to produce something that was beyond that. When I retired, I then joined the NHS. Total change, but a remarkable organization, one of the largest employers in the world, beset by complexity, by problems, but actually all about people who care and help people. And I chaired boards initially of a mental health trust for over 6 years. Quite fascinating to see that side of medicine, of caring for people and understanding people with difficulties and helping them to lead better, more sustainable lives. And then I moved into the chaotic and extraordinary world of acute medicine and chaired boards of hospitals. And until about a year ago, when I actually decided that I had probably done enough of the public sector. And it was about that time, David, that through a mutual friend that you and I met, and I was immediately struck and intrigued by not only the breadth of your vision, but also the underlying concepts of what you were trying to achieve. How do you harness knowledge? How do you use it sustainably to add value, but ethically as well? Throughout my life, I think being fascinated by people and, as it were, as I said at the outset, looking at the world through their eyes, it's common values that bring us together. It's that ethically driven approach that sustains businesses and enables them to adapt and yet remain consistent to their core purpose. So, and I saw a lot of that reflected in your thinking. So that's why I suppose I'm here today.
Oh, very good. Thanks. Very good. You have got a very impressive career history. I mean, I'm really impressed by your track record. Well done. I share some of your traits because I used to chair a board for a mental health hospital in Malta. And I must say, I share your views in terms of when you see so much suffering of people and trying to come up to terms with helping these people to prosper, even though they are at their worst. I think it is something and perhaps that was one of my experiences which has led me to move towards a high social impact model where you create a system of what I call sustainability, which basically you need to have an element of commercialization and profit in order to make sustainability sustainable in the longer term, because obviously you need money to help people, and therefore you need to create an element of social impact, but also profitability, which keeps sustaining the social impact and incentivizing stakeholders to contribute in that cause. So that is obviously definitely a shared model. From your experience, Chris, you have a long history in professional services, but also even in health, which I think there are shared commonalities because you're dealing mostly with professional people, and also both disciplines have an element of know-how. In the case of professional services, is very technical from a commercially driven perspective, but in the context of health, it is more perhaps socially or human driven, which in a way blends what we want to do. Can you perhaps recount what is your experience and how well do professional service firms, in your view, succeed in retaining know-how and how they manage know-how within their organization?
I think you touched on a really complex but fascinating area here, David. I think if I look at the complexities of knowledge and understanding and insight and technical detail that exist in both professional services, whether you're talking about the intricacies of tax or accounting or whatever it is, on the one hand, or law on the one hand, or the complexities of delivering great healthcare on the other. Both organizations really prize those people who are doing very well at these things, who are super proficient at that. What they don't prize so much, what they don't understand so much, is what are the competencies that are required to actually enable those who have this knowledge to deliver of their best in a way that's sustainable. And therefore, very often they confuse the real talents in delivering a service, say, well, that talent is transferable actually to running a business. And if you could harness their knowledge and make it available to professionals who actually do understand administration, who do understand planning, who do understand strategy, and structure it in such a way that the real stars who actually save people's lives or solve intractable problems in terms of corporate structure or tax or whatever it is, then you really have something that's really quite remarkable. So you need to be able to tease out where are the gaps, what is the knowledge which you have stronger, and where are possibly those knowledge gaps that, if you take the professionals who deliver care or deliver advice and try and get them to solve the other problems, that knowledge of theirs, that technical knowledge tends to fall away and they get overwhelmed by the actual challenge of running a business. So having a total approach, an insight into what are the different competencies, what are the different areas of knowledge, and how do you structure those appropriately, I think is absolutely fundamental. And so what intrigues me about HumAInity is actually, how can we do this? How can we help harness that knowledge, manage it, structure it in such a way that the right knowledge is available to the right people at the right place at the right time to take their businesses forward. So it's quite complex once you start trying to express it, which it was never going to be easy anyway. But I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it is. It is. You're very right. And in a way, at the moment, what we're doing is we are creating frameworks and tools, but we're not limiting that to a desktop exercise. We're piloting a number of initiatives to test them out and to refine, improve and revise the tools and methodologies to make them really practical and pragmatic. Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, we don't want just a fancy methodology which is published out there, but we want something which is really workable in practice, you know? What further to your observations as well, Chris, what I notice in the most knowledge-based industries, even financial services, what I've seen and what we've all seen, is that in the past we had compartmentalization of services. So, for example, if you take banks, you've got loans, you've got investments, you've got deposits,
Mm.
savings. In professional services, you had tax, you had accounting, you had advisory, so on and so forth. In healthcare, and I've seen this also firsthand when I used to chair the board, where you had different professions which were working independently. But then the models are changing completely because they're changing into one which is multidisciplinary. So you've got banks which are creating multidisciplinary teams that focus on the customer. You've got you've got the professional service firms which are creating bundles, but in a way they're trying to create the CRM system, a client relationship manager who tries to bring them on board under one roof. And you've got also the healthcare professionals, which are also working through a multidisciplinary team. So in my time, for example, you used to have professionals coming around a table and discussing specific cases between them to address a particular client rather than every profession gives his input on his own. You create this diffusion of opinions, which creates a single opinion amongst these different professionals. In the context of professional service firms, yes, I know there is the element of a client relationship aspect, and they have done quite well in this context. But do you think that professional service firms are adept at actually cross-fertilizing know-how across the different disciplines that they operate in your view?
Very interesting questions. I think that both professional services firms and also the health sector in this country really struggle with this. And it's always this thing, when you build a real deep specialization, in a sense, you're almost creating a silo for yourself.
Yes.
And certainly I've seen in various professional services firms, and particularly in health, where you get competing views between these silos. Therefore, the sweet spot of a multidisciplinary team that really works effectively has proved very, very hard to achieve. You almost get this internal competition. But actually, when you look about it, when you stand back and you think about it, if you have a patient who has a different sort of presents in different ways, it shouldn't be a competition between the specialists. It should be actually a collaboration between the specialists around the company. In the professional services firms, the most successful integrated relationships were with non-quoted clients, where you actually had one, shall we say, very sort of close advisor who brought all the services in. And, you're talking about the CRM. And that used to be a really wonderful thing to see. When you get into quoted companies, it's far more complex because regulation comes in, law comes in, customer practice come in, and also complexity. If you're talking about large multinational companies, the complexity of these organizations is astonishing. And therefore, to bring those services to bear together, not only at the head office level, but at the sort of regional office level and the national level, is very, very challenging. And it's not one I don't think that professional services companies are necessarily very well equipped to do. So, I think there's huge potential in sort of developing a much more joined up approach where you're pooling knowledge and you're using
Definitely.
the analysis of that pool of knowledge to actually identify what are the real issues here? Where do we really need to sort of focus?
Yes, I fully agree. One of the insights you gave me when we were in London when we met, yourself and even Rupert when we went together, was related to this point in a way, and it really got me thinking because I was always thinking initially professional services want thought leadership, thought leadership, thought leadership. But you rightly pointed out that professional services are really about providing a safe pair of hands to the clients, and safe pair of hands and innovation might be at odds in some cases. So you need to be really careful about providing a balanced approach in how
Mm.
you actually enable these firms to innovate, but in a safe space. So in this context, in fact, based on the feedback that you gave me, but also others who gave me, we changed a bit the concept and we focused more on extracting the best of what you have as opposed to coming up with something new. Of course, there are some companies, professional services that thought leadership was of paramount importance. For example, if you are a strategic boutique advisory firm, clearly innovation is fundamental because your business is about innovating in clients. But if you are a legal firm or if you are an audit firm, clearly assurance is one of the most important considerations in that context. An area that we are developing with a safe space is the development of RFPs, because RFPs generate an immediate benefit to professional
Mm.
services, and it is a relatively safe space because you're not delivering to clients, but it is an area where it is aspiring for growth as
Mm.
opposed to delivering something to clients. I don't know what you think about that.
I think there's a great advantage to sort of beginning to develop what we want to do in a safe space, because
Yes,
otherwise you tend to put all your eggs in one basket, then it doesn't work, and then you sort of sit, oh,
yes.
what do I do now? So I think that is really important. You mentioned another thing there, David, which I think is also important about one of the things you learn, certainly in banking and in professional services, is that your clients usually are far more knowledgeable than you are.
Yes,
There is
definitely.
an exception that I found in banking, that actually the lawyers who advise you on your legal agreements may probably understand banking far better than you do, because they actually have to sort of try and define it in legal terms. But that apart, so what you're really doing, I think, often in professional services, if you're really considered and thoughtful in the way you go about it, is you are helping to harness what is already there within a business and channel it and focus it in the right way. I mean, you and I have discussed this in the past. I mean, the old saw, if only Siemens knew what Siemens knows, you know,
That's it,
there's
yes.
so much latent knowledge and experience in these firms. And so
Yes,
much of it just sort of falls by the wayside or isn't brought to bear at the right time. And I
yes.
think that catalytic approach is actually
Mhm.
really helpful to companies. How can they make the most of what they've got? The
Yes.
chances that we're going to be more expert than an expert are pretty remote. You know,
You've touched on a very important point, Chris. It's about the latent know-how that there is, and our role is to help them extract that know-how and
yeah,
make it available throughout their organization, no? So that
yeah.
is, I think,
Go
the
back to our mental
fundamentals.
health model. How do we help our
Yes,
service users live the best possible lives that they possibly can? You know, by helping them understand that. What it is that will
yes,
enable them to do that.
definitely. Chris, where would you like Humanity Works to be in a few years' time? And I say 3 to 5 years' time.
What I'd like it to be is to have a track record of helping businesses become better, more sustainable businesses with a sort of diverse client base, where the word is already getting out there that actually these are people who can help you take your business sustainably to where you didn't think it could go.
Very good, very good. One of our ambitions, and perhaps this is a bit of an aspiration at this stage, is
Hmm.
to create the concept of collective intelligence, where in a
Hmm.
way it is a bit about creating, so using the same methodology for us and creating internal know-how to
Hmm.
actually build a knowledge base for other firms to benchmark themselves against other firms in an anonymous way so that they can learn and improve based on best practices that are shared between the different firms. What is your
Hmm.
view about that?
I think so. I think that is something that we should really aspire to. And I think, it's a bit, as you say, walking the talk. If we can't use it ourselves, then
Yes,
how can we
exactly,
expect
exactly.
anybody else to use it? I think the other thing is that that kind of using ourselves as a laboratory, as a development for that, is really important. I mean, all the hype around AI at the moment, in a sense, AI isn't going to give you anything that you don't already know, because it's the accumulation of what you know. And the
Yes.
real key here with AI is, how do you manage it and mine it and use it in a way that we do every day when we come up with a new idea, and
Yes.
how do we use it to enrich our thinking, to take us into broader,
Fantastic.
more innovative
Fantastic.
directions?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I always argue on what you're saying. I always argue that it is very to prompt ChatGPT or Claude or any other LLM and ask him a question. But that question really has access to external data, which is available for everyone. And that doesn't create a competitive edge for you. So what creates a competitive edge is really to
What you do
extract
up
your
here.
latent know-how, and using AI to help you extract that. So this is where we want to go, which is a different model which we want to aspire to develop in the foreseeable future.
Yep, absolutely. And excited to be part of it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chris. I'm really looking forward to work with you in the
Likewise.
next weeks, and I hope that we'll have a very good collaboration in the future. Thank you.
I look forward to that. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
David. Goodbye. And Pavika, very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye bye.